Reading to you from the Gospel according to Mark, the 10th chapter, beginning at the 5th verse. These 12, meaning the disciples that Jesus has just called, these 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for laborers deserve their food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy, and stay there until you leave. As you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it's not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. Truly, I tell you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
When Jesus sent his disciples out, he was counting on someone to take them in. Hospitality was an important gift that those first Christians offered to one another. You know, there weren't any hotels, or what we think of at all, not even something like Budget Inn or Hotel 6. Travel was risky, and having a safe place to stay was important. But you know, offering hospitality always involves some risk. You wanted to know just whom you were letting into your house. You didn't want just anybody there, nor did you want to have to be responsible for them. Yet, in a world where many folk never went much of anywhere, these strangers could open up your world and bring you new ideas, new ways of looking at the world. Now, so often when we think of hospitality, I tend to think of myself as the host, the one who opens my house to some traveler. In fact, that was part of our justification in buying such a big house. There are rooms to share, and we've had any interesting number of folk come and stay with us. What I want to share with you today is my experience as a guest in Cuba, and tell you about some of the folk who have welcomed me. They didn't know me, and yet because I am their sister in Christ, they opened their lives and their homes to me, and the others with whom I traveled. We first went to Cuba in 1999. My husband was part of a study group with the improbable name of Dog Bones. I'll tell you later what that was about. They decided to go to Cuba and learn from the church there. We stayed at the church in Molina-Moore, a working-class suburb of Havana. And the group that traveled to Cuba last year from this church also stayed there in Molina-Moore. I don't think they've changed the mattresses since. They're still pretty lumpy. At that time, the pastor was Carlos Emilio Hahn. His father was Cuban, his mother American, and so he carries a double citizenship. When the revolution broke out, his father, who was also a Presbyterian pastor, was studying at Austin Seminary in Texas. We need to go home, he said. Now that was no small decision. Most of the Presbyterian types were fleeing Cuba, and the pastors were running away with them, and in fact there was a real effort on the part of American churches to get pastors out of Cuba. The ship was practically empty, says Carlos. Everyone was leaving and nobody was going back. But what they went back to was pretty bleak. The churches were nearly empty. The new Constitution made atheism official, and there were penalties for being a Christian. Had it not been for the older women, the churches would not be there today. As it was, the few pastors that remained agreed that they would take a salary of only $100 a year. Try raising a family on that. And that's the world in which Carlos grew up. After the Russians left Cuba, he was among the pastors that met with Fidel Castro. Let us in, they said. We don't agree with everything, But we want much of what you want. We want health care. We want education. We want improved living for ordinary people. That meeting went on for 6 hours, and it was broadcast on national television live. And the Constitution was changed. Many of the strictures against Christians were eased, although there are still some in place. And because he was a Christian, Carlos was only allowed to get a technical university degree. I think it was in engineering. But he couldn't study anything where ideas were discussed and his might challenge the status quo. He served the church in Louisville and was moderator of the Synod, which is their equivalent of the General Assembly. And he then left to become one of the program directors of the World Council of Churches in Geneva. The joys of dual citizenship is that he had an American passport and had the ability to travel. But he's now coming back to Cuba to serve as president of Matanzas Evangelical Theological Seminary, where both Presbyterian and Episcopal pastors are trained. Now, graduating from that seminary this spring are Jesus and Marielis. They're members of the church in Placetas, where we have a partnership relationship. They're going to be ordained in November. My husband's very anxious to go back for that. And they've already been assigned to churches. We had dinner in their house on the first trip that we took to Cuba, and the second trip to Cuba, and our first trip to this little town of Placetas. And at that point, Jesus was teaching a Bible class. I try to get them to ask questions, he says. Cubans don't want to ask questions. What's wrong with them? Of course, nothing political. I just want them to ask questions. And I'm sitting there thinking, you think there's nothing political about asking questions in a country like this? Survive by keeping your head down and not getting noticed. What you're doing, Jesus, is really pretty subversive. Which, frankly, is some of what we do when we go. We began our partnership with this particular church because of Wendy Kuntz. She's a member of the Presbyterian Church in Woodbury, New Jersey, where I spent a couple years as their interim. An architect, she offered her skills when the church building in Placetas had been condemned and needed to be rebuilt. The session was then composed of 4 older women, good at many things, but absolutely overwhelmed at the idea of taking on a building project. Well, what do you want in a church building? Asked Wendy. Well, this is what we can do, replied the women, who could only conceive of replacing the small, ugly building with one just like it. It took Wendy 2 years to get them to dream of what could be. You know, that's what happens to people who live in a repressive government. You lose your ability to dream. By the time I went, Wendy had sketched out a very functional, attractive, Cuban-looking building. But, you know, you looked at people looking at this and you thought, they don't believe this is ever going to happen. You could just see there thinking, well, crazy Americans thinking we could actually do this. What we've done as the American church visitors, friends, we've coached, encouraged, and cheered. And now the walls are up and the roof is going on. Several of the supporting beams are in place. Watching all this, I realized how very few places there are for these folk to develop any kind of leadership skill. It's really not encouraged in a society like that. Well, meet Consuela. She is one of the driving forces in that congregation. She leads the choir, teaches the Bible class, serves on the session, and she's now gone on the Synod Council. Her commitment to that church and to her Lord runs deep and strong. In watching her in those early meetings with the session, I could see her skepticism that this new church building would ever get beyond the paper. You could just sort of, the eyes would glaze over. Now she's one who encourages the others. This is a journey of faith, she says. When we started, we didn't see how we could ever do this or where we could get the money. We didn't think we could do it, but little by little, it's happening. We thought we couldn't do it, but now we could build anything. Money is an issue. I mean, hello, we're talking churches. It's an issue at every church. For Cubans who generally live on $15 to $20 a month, Money for such a building is beyond them. And while we think having a really quite nice church building come in for under $200,000 seems like a pretty good deal, to them that is huge. Our presbytery has included them in our mission budget for the last couple of years, as has West Jersey Presbytery, which is directly across the river, and a few others. The Korean Presbyterian Church, those are a product of American missions in the last century. The Korean Presbyterian Church has pledged $20,000 to put the roof on. Consuela is right. It is a journey of faith. And just when it seems they can go no further, the money comes. Now, part of what makes our time in Placetas so special is the home that welcomes these wandering pilgrims. Xiomara Arenas is the host that opens her home to us. Mi casa e tu casa, she says. My house is your house. And she means it. She too has served on the Synod Council, and she leads Los Ancianos, the ancient ones. I love that. It's the name for the senior citizens group. Her heart really belongs to the camp that she and her husband developed and ran for the Synod. Church camp, not so different in Cuba from what it is here in America. And every night we sit on her porch, debrief the day, talk of what we've learned, what's touched us, where we see God at work. These are just some of the folk that make our trips to Cuba so important. And we've decided that we really shouldn't call them mission trips, because that seems to imply a sort of wallpaper, paint, hammer and nails kind of experience. We don't do that, because Cubans don't need that. They can do that themselves. We've decided to call them pilgrimages. They're a time to learn, a time to be open to the moving of the Spirit, a time to grow. And here, as we gather at this table, these sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ join us. I sat at their table several weeks ago and shared communion. I think of them when we sit here.